Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the second part of the Lepide Sherpa security debate. Last time we talked about zero trust and some of its perspective on security in your organization. Today we're going to talk about maybe the opposite side of that coin, trust but verify. Joining me today is my co-presenter, Aidan Seminster, the CEO of Lepide Software. Aidan, thanks for taking time to join us today.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a topic we've been talking a lot about recently, so delighted to be here.
Good, perfect timing to maybe wade into this a little bit. So right. Let's talk about, there we go, advance the slide. Let's talk about in terms of agenda today. Aidan and I are both going to give you just a very brief overview of our two organizations so you understand who you're talking to today. Quick recap of what we talked about last time, and then we're going to wade into this trust but verify scenario. Probably, at least from my perspective, the most important piece of information we're going to share today is some stories from the field about how other clients are implementing this kind of a process today. Perhaps give you some ideas, maybe spur some motivation for your program moving forward. For those of you who don't know, Sherpa Software is based in the US. We're actually outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Been in business for almost 20 years now. We have a 20-year anniversary coming up in September. And we build software to help our customers do data governance kinds of initiatives. So managing electronic information, being able to search for it, identify for an e-discovery situation, and being able to wrap some controls around your content in various repositories. We have a number of customers in many countries, and kind of proud of the fact that over the course of our tenure, our 20-year tenure, we've had over 3,500 customers who've used our products to manage electronic content. And Aidan, maybe you can give them a little Lepide background.
Yeah, sure. So we've been around since 2015. So in a lot of regards, we're still considered to be a startup. And we've got about 1,000 customers. So I'm based in the UK, but we have a big office over in Austin, Texas, and an office over in Asia. And our customers are pretty spread across all different regions. Principally, our goal is to help organizations in the protection of unstructured data. And primarily, we're talking about that involves understanding not only where it is, but who's got access to it and what's actually happening to it. I guess we consider ourselves to be a data-centric security vendor. That's sort of how we position ourselves. So yeah, that's probably the best way of explaining this. I'm the CEO of the company as well. And we've got about 75 people that work for our organization in total. So it gives you a bit of an idea.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. Thanks for that little background. So last week, Aidan kind of led our discussion because he's got a lot of expertise around this Zero Trust initiative. And we talked about how many organizations are locking down information from a variety of perspectives. You know, it might be from the network point of view. It could be from a device point of view. It could be at the information level. And we're really encouraging our audience to focus on the content itself, the information, as you start to make your plans from a security point of view, right? And Aidan shared this interesting story about how when his father began to work, basically he had no trust, right? You weren't even able to get into the building without some kind of assistance, let alone access any information or get to the file room, if I recall right, Aidan.
That's right.
Today, I mean, contrast that. My first day at Sherpa Software, I got a key to the front door and I got a code to the security system so I could disable it if I needed to come in off hours. So, you know, I hadn't even filled out my employee paperwork yet when all that began. But the point is, you know, things have changed. Our business dynamic is so much faster. The information is pouring in from different areas. And even in that scenario, you know, somebody knew the moment that I tripped that alarm code when I put my code in. Rick was in the building, and you know, why was Rick in the building? What was he doing for it? Did he have a purpose, and so forth. So there was still an element of oversight that took place, even though I have been granted that level of trust.
Sure,
anything else you want to throw in there, Aidan?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, I think the definition is, you know, whereas in the past people were given pretty much no access, I think nowadays for organizations to function, it's probably more realistic that you have to give people, and as people have to be fast now and they have to have access to the information they need immediately. They can't there can't be any delays if you want to have that competitive edge in business. So I think, especially for a larger organization, the concept that you cannot let anyone have access to anything until they've really, until they've proven they need it, it just isn't necessarily practical. So I think that probably that's one of the things that's had to drive the change, of course, right?
Absolutely.
And I guess also the sheer volume of data and the sheer volume of information that organizations are having to contend with now, and the growth of it makes it also impractical in some ways to totally restrict access to everything. I think that that's a challenge, which also, by the way, on a side note, I think creates a massive problem with this tangibility of data as well. I think because there's so much of it, people treat it with less respect as well.
Oh,
that's
interesting point. Yeah, absolutely, because they're so accustomed to it, right?
That's right. That's right. They take it for granted, and I think that absolute lack of respect that a lot of organizations have towards data comes from the fact that it's so commoditized, and that I think that's a massive problem for data security in general. But because of the sheer volume of data, because data is so commoditized, I think the difficulty is that it's such a huge amount. You can't just restrict access to everything. You kind of need to give them access and just make sure that they need it afterwards. You can have grant it and then worry about it later. I think that's the mentality, I think, quite often of a lot of organizations. Anyway.
Really? Yeah, and that's exactly what our premise is today. It's like grant them access, but then keep tabs on it, keep on that verification. So that's maybe as you're starting to contemplate these trust but verify model, maybe some things to just kind of keep in mind. And Aiden really touched on some of this. So this model typically has a little bit lower impact on business users, but what we mean by that is, as Aiden pointed out, they need to be able to respond quickly to dynamic business situations. And in order to do that, they need to have access to the information that's important to them or to their job function. I don't know about your team, Aiden, but I've worked with a number of customers who've been trying to pilot our software. And some of those organizations, their infrastructure is so locked down that everything that they try to do in terms of running that pilot becomes frustrating to them. We can't get permissions to the file share. We can't get a service account generated. We can't get this. We can't get that. So it's almost counterproductive, from the point of view. Yeah, it's very secure, but on the other hand, they can't get their work performed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we see the same. We see the same. Yeah.
From the standpoint of who's making important decisions about the information, as Aiden pointed out, we're getting lots of content from lots of different places. It's almost virtually impossible for one, sort of oversight party, your CISO or your security team, to understand from each of those business units or each of those information silos what matters and what doesn't. You really need the people who are interacting with that content, making decisions about should this purchase order be approved, or should this project go forward, and have we properly handled the client information. You need a subject matter expert to be able to manage the decision.
That's a really interesting point, because I think that this is one of the other big problems with data, but also this trust but verify thing, is that it requires somebody that actually understands the data to be able to make the right decisions about verification as well. And I think that, so I had a conversation yesterday with the CISO, actually former CISO for Bank of America, and his fundamental belief was that when you think about data and you think about data security and you think about these things, is that it's not actually security's problem. Like, the business needs to tell the security team, well, what is it that we should care about? What is it you want us to protect? It isn't the responsibility of the security team to understand what needs to be protected. I don't entirely agree with that, if I'm absolutely honest. I think that it has to be a joint responsibility, and I think that it's a collective responsibility of the entire organization to work towards that. But this question about, like, who is it that should actually, that should determine whether that is appropriate levels of access or not, I think that creates a massive problem when practically trying to implement either zero trust or trust but verifies. Well, who actually has the right amount of knowledge to be able to determine that is appropriate, that is right, and that's not right? that creates a big problem. No one wants to take ownership of the data.
No universal answer to that either, because it varies so widely based on the business.
Right.
Hmm.
There is no answer. No. But I think this problem of who truly owns and cares about the data, whose job is it to care about the data, is one of the biggest problems when thinking about this topic.
For sure. And as we get into some of the client scenarios in a moment or two here, I'm going to give you a little bit of information on some of what our clients are doing from that point of view that ties in nicely to that point. And again, this is kind of an extension of what we talked about, right? Security needs to be able to understand our users responsibly making their decisions, those subject matter experts we just referred to. And they need to be able to maybe override what decisions have been made. It's not always, even though that person might be making the decision, in some cases you may want to veto them and reverse their opinion. And then finally, the process of verification performed by some third party, your security team, your records management team, your project manager, whoever it might be that's in charge of sort of that oversight layer, that verify layer, that really helps ensure your client confidentiality. I don't know if this is an issue as much in the UK. Aidan, we see a tremendous amount of this in the US because a lot of the organizations we deal with have clauses in their contracts or their delivery models that have client confidentiality specifics they have to meet.
Yeah, we see a fair amount. We do still see that fair amount in the UK as well. Yeah.
So just kind of a blanket statement, from Sherpa's point of view, how do we feel about this issue, and that we believe that employees should be held accountable for that information. And we should be able to verify that, in fact, they're using it responsibly. So let's talk a little bit about that approach to trust and verify. Go ahead, Amy. Something you want to interject?
No. Carry on, please. Carry on.
Okay. So our approach to trust and verify, really, we think this is kind of impossible to do without having the proper set of tools involved. Aidan pointed out the fact that we're getting information from so many different perspectives today. Almost, if you think about, your criteria when you hire a new employee, if they can't handle email and several different chat applications and text and information that's coming from all these resources, how useful are they going to be to you? Because that's really what we expect today, right? We have Teams, we have Slack, we have email, we have text. All this content's being forwarded to us. And in many cases, that's how we're running our organizations, especially in this pandemic era, when we were all forced to, in a very short period of time, start to work remotely in teams. You have to be able to juggle that information. You have to be able to, from an organizational point of view, make sure that clients or your employees, rather, are appropriately dealing with it.
Right.
Slides don't want to advance there. So, blanket statement again, end users have the information about what's important and what isn't important. They need to be able to communicate that to the people who are responsible for verification, but we need to keep them honest about it. And we're going to talk about some ways that can help happen. From the standpoint of implementing a Trust but Verify program, we believe that you probably can't do this across the entire organization all at once. I think we talked a little bit about this in the last session. It needs to be sort of a focused approach because there's just too much content in too many different places, right? But if you do put that infrastructure in place to be able to monitor that information and on an ongoing basis, sort of keep an eye on what's going on in the organization, it makes it a lot easier moving forward. One of the things I like about the Lepide platform when I started working with Aidan and his team was they have the ability to monitor user intent. So beyond just who has access, what are they doing with the information? How are they monitoring it? We can start to get some intelligence about how often has Rick opened this spreadsheet in the last 20 days. And he used to access it once a month. All of a sudden, he's been accessing it 3 times a day. What does that mean? So there are some indicators that might help you sort of head off a problem before it occurs from that point of view.
That's right. Yeah, I think fundamentally for my mind, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but
Not at all.
I think that the concept and the framework and the philosophy of trust but verify is right. Absolutely, companies need to be taking that stance that I'm fine giving access, but I'm going to make sure that, you know, expect what you inspect. I'm going to make sure that we actually understand what they're doing with it, and we have a process and we have a method for being able to determine, are they acting in a way that's appropriate? Because I think that is a lot more of a practical approach than just zero trust. So I think that it's an ideology as much as it is a program. It's just making sure that throughout the entire organization, throughout all your security policies, throughout everything you do, you're starting from this position is, I'm only going to give you access if I can verify that you're acting responsibly with it, you're acting appropriately with it, you're actually that you need it. You know, providing we can maintain those conditions that you're acting responsibly, you do need it, you are using it, you'll keep it. But if you can't prove those things, if there are things that tell me that those are not appropriate, we'll take them off you. And that's what that's how I see this sort of trust but verify thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and good insight, actually. I wanted to share a couple of real-world examples. One of the things that I always get asked as I talk to prospective clients during the course of a sales engagement is, how are your other similar organizations to us using your software to be successful? So I understand that there's value in maybe looking at what your competitors or your peers in your particular industry are doing and being able to maybe get some perspective or some insights from the way they're handling their programs or maybe the way they've implemented their strategy. So we wanted to share a couple of real world examples about how that might occur. In this first example, the customer is in a consulting services market. They've got several 100,000 employees scattered across the world. Those folks are working directly with end clients. So they've got a lot of proprietary information about not only their own organization, but the clients that they're engaged with on these various projects as they kind of move through that process, the project process. Their implementation of this trust but verify model involves the engagement manager as sort of the controlling party. So as my project team rolls off of an engagement, I, as an engagement manager, can notify security that that has occurred. And typically what they do is they scan a subset of their project team's devices. So I have maybe 20 people on my team working on this project. I want you to scan the devices of these 5 folks to ensure that they've complied with our policies for archiving and disposal of that client information at the end of the project. So the employees do have, some guidelines that they're supposed to play with. As the engagement closes, you have to either archive this information to a secure network share, or you have to dispose of it from your computer, your hard drive. But the verification part comes in as security performs those scans to make sure that that's actually occurred. So we do have a way to verify, in fact, that it's happening. If there is some indication that we have a problem, either several employees haven't removed that information yet as the scans performed. Maybe we haven't given them enough time yet. Maybe there's an extenuating circumstance. Maybe they're just not playing by the rules, but somebody is paying attention to that. Ultimately, security is providing that feedback to the engagement manager that says, hey, we've got a problem here. Somebody needs to address it. So we do have that oversight layer being implemented. So that's one approach. Now, the second case study, if you will, that I wanted to talk about, these folks are in a similar industry. It's a professional services organization. They're also doing client engagements and have a lot of client confidentiality sorts of overtones to what they're doing. But their perspective on it is just slightly different. They've taken a little bit more employee-centric approach from the way they've implemented their program. So what happens in this case is our team rolls off of an engagement. We've completed our work with a client or a customer. And the records team in this case are the ones who are sort of in charge of that wrap up process. So the project ends, that project gets marked as completed in their project management system. That triggers a wrap up process that records gets involved with. And as part of that process, they perform a scan of the project team members who are involved with that project. So far, pretty similar to the first use case. Here's where it varies. As that scan's completed, each one of those employees, those project team members, gets an email that says, here are the files that we found, or the emails that we found, or the content that we found that is tagged to you that was relevant to that engagement. You have X number of days to mark or indicate a disposition on that content. And there's a default disposition. If they don't take action, it's automatically going to be deleted or removed. That's the oversight comes into play there. But the employee then is the one who actually makes that decision by looking at each of those items and marking them as archive, retain, delete, whatever those business categories are that they've specified. Those indications or markings that the employees made on those individual content items then are automated through the records management process to perform that disposition, archive it to the SharePoint site, delete it from the employee device, and so forth. So this goes back to that point we made earlier where there's a subject matter expert who is heavily involved in the process of generating this information, who can say, yes, this is important, we need to hang on to it. Maybe there's a subsequent engagement, we're going to have to recycle through this, so we need to archive it. Or maybe it was just transient information, we're going to go ahead and mark it for deletion. But somebody with knowledge of that content is making that informed decision in the context of oversight. So I don't know if that was helpful. Was there anything you wanted to share from your point of view on the way some of your clients are interacting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is quite a mature organisation that you're engaging with. I think that I think that quite a few organisations we speak to, they don't even know what they've got. They don't know who's got access. They don't know who's got access to any of the stuff really, because it's just sprawled out of control. And I think that it's a real. I think that this is a very mature organisation. I think that a lot of organisations aren't this far down the road with that type of data governance. That's certainly been our experience, anyway.
Yeah, no question, and they do have a pretty well articulated process. In addition,
that's right. That's it. Yeah, and this is it's refreshing.
well, sometimes it's instructional. I mean, if you're an organization that doesn't have this sort of level of oversight in place, maybe it starts to provide some guidelines, a roadmap moving forward, or maybe a direction that you can head in. So I wanted to share that.
And I totally empathise with. I'm not passing judgment when I cite that the level of insight organizations have over their data is shocking, because I do absolutely appreciate that it's a monster of a task to truly understand where all your sensitive data is, and it's an even more monstrous task trying to work out really who actually has access and who needs access. That's no mean feat. That's a huge, it can be a huge undertaking. And it's getting tougher and tougher with the advent, with the sheer growth of volume of data that's happening, and the growth and spread of the number of places it could be. I mean, and then especially you say everyone working from home, it's just made it even more complicated. So I absolutely empathise, but I think that a lot of organisations have got to get maybe some of the fundamentals right, that even before they start thinking about sort of trust, let's just figure out who's actually got access to it, not whether they should have access to it. let's just work out like some of the stuff, the fundamentals before this stuff sometimes.
Good point. Pick a starting place and let's get the ball rolling.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So two sides of the coin, from a wrap up standpoint, we're about to the bottom of our time slot here. Zero trust, where we're locking down everything. Trust but verify, where, as Aidan pointed out, you're trying to get some information from your employees about what's important, what's not important, and maybe just identify who has access to what. hopefully we gave you some ideas about how you can move forward with those two initiatives, or which approach might be right in your particular industry. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share, Aiden, as we draw down on this?
Yeah. I mean, I think really for me, it's just about just trying to. I think that one of the difficulties when we talk about a lot of organizations trying to put in place either zero trust or trust but verify is that they're trying to achieve this with often too many tools that don't talk to one another. There is not enough integration out there with the different tools available to try and achieve this task, and I think that often is a challenge as well. Right. So we find some organizations, they might know where their data is, but they don't know who's got access to it, or they might know who's got access to it, but they don't know whether that's important or sensitive or not. Or it might be that they know what's happening to their data, but they don't know what kind of a data it is. So I kind of feel that, like, and that's exactly why Lepide and Sherpa have started working together, is that we recognize that there's so much more value when you can actually carry out all of these tasks. You're actually able to do the job of actually locking down your data if you put these things together. In and of themselves, it can be a very complicated process. So I think really it's just a case of getting the foundations right. Like fundamentally, like know where your risk is, know what it is you want to protect, start there. Figure out which are your highest risk users, which of the users have got the most amount of access to your most sensitive data. Make sure that you at very least you've got a group of individuals, a group of users that are your highest risk users, and make sure that you're verifying them at very least, even if you're just picking a subset of, say, I don't know, 1,000 of your 8,000 employees that have got access to this stuff that really matters. At least exercise some type of verification on the ones that could do the most amount of damage. At very least start there. I kind of think that, like, it's a really important thing to do. Zero trust isn't it's not practical. Trust but verify works, but it's a phased approach. So start with some of the stuff that matters the most, the users that could do the most harm, and start from working your way down from there. I guess that's my only closing comments there.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. So we've tried to confine these two sessions to, as Aiden pointed out, more of a strategic view of the problem and the two different approaches to maybe resolving it. We are going to get a little bit more tactical. There's an upcoming webinar that we're working on right now. I can't provide an actual date for you yet because we're kind of assembling that content and we're kind of in the final process of putting together the approach. But during that webinar, we're going to get a little more tactical and show you how you can use both of our tools. So it'll be a little bit more of a product demo kind of a session where Sherpa's tools can be shown and how you can find, locate, and manage information based on various criteria, and then feed those results into the Lepide data security platform to understand some of the things that we just talked about. What's user intent? Who has access? Why do they have access? How did they get access? So stay tuned. Keep an eye on either the Lepide or Sherpa website, and we'll be sending out information about those sessions as soon as we have them ready to go. So thanks, Aiden, for your time today. Pleasure as always to work with you.
Thank you. Rick, been a pleasure. Take care of yourself.
All right, guys.
Yes, bye.